Okay. I can hear you quite well. So take it away. You're the presenter.
And you can see the screen?
Yes, I can. And I believe everyone else can. So just before we start, Joe, let me just say, if for anybody that's not used GoToMeeting before, there are two little arrows that point at each other up in the top right corner of that GoToMeeting box. If you click on that, it'll move that box up out of the way, up to the top of the screen, so it doesn't get in your way. And then that allows you to maximize your screen as well, so that you can see the presentation better. So I just want to mention that. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. As Tony explained, this is for beginners. It's not for complicated options, but I'm going to go through the basics of adding an estimate and some of the basics of the files that build estimating. The first thing I want to point to here and there, I understand clients don't realize we have a manual. We do have a manual online. So if you go to your network drive, you'll see something typically it's called ASI manual or GUI manual. And under that manual, you will see cost estimating amongst many others. So if you go to estimating, you'll see a variety of folders. If you see the main manual here, and then on there we are in corrugated estimating as well as folding, but you would click fold estimating documentation, and that's the whole manual. There are other sub-manuals that, various types of tips, like you can see folding carton, folding tips. So there are individual questions people have asked us over the years that we've documented with documents, so they can be helpful as well. So what I want to do first is I just want to go ahead and add an estimate, and I'm just going to start with what we call the browser. So when we go into estimating, the first thing you're presented with is a browser. And what this browser is, at the very top, we call these icons. Underneath, we call these folders or tabs, which are nothing more than screenshots. And then if I was to go into a specific tab or folder, at the bottom we have buttons, which are your executables. For instance, if we wanted to go into update mode, or we can cancel update mode, add copy. So those are the function keys that actually do the programming or the daily processing. I want to go back to the browser, though, and show some of the basics. The first thing, you can output anything in the estimate. You can use the Excel icon, and you notice you can output to Excel. And this is a report writer approach. Here's all the fields that you can pick, and on the right-hand side are all the fields that I did pick. If I wanted to eliminate a field, I just remove it. And if I want to move a field up or down, I can move it up or down, and then it will output to Excel. So just want to let you know that option's available. The next option is moving columns. And if I click this option, I can then move columns around. As you can see, I can move the length over to here, but I'm going to keep it in front of the style. But you may want to, move the customer number to be the first or second. It's up to you how you want to do this. But this is by user ID. So each user can rearrange the headings and the fields. And you can expand fields, you can shrink fields. And the key is to get more data displayed so you don't have to scroll left and right. And by the way, you're looking at this screen here. It's an expanded screen. The way you do that is you click the Help button, click About, and you notice I have Auto Maximize. I'm going to uncheck that just to show you what it looks like. You notice it says, do I want to save the columns? And I'm going to say yes. If I go back in, now I've got a much smaller screen presentation. Now I can always click the Maximize, but if you always want it to be maximized, you just click About up here at the top under Help, click Auto Maximize, say OK. And the next time you go into that screen, it's expanded. And every screen works that way in our system, but it's by user ID. So each user ID has to do this for every screen. These other icons I'm going to explain as I get into estimating. This guy right here basically is really for data collection. You can download data from the data collection module actual machine times, make ready and run speeds, and set hours and times and waste, and move it right to the estimate. So rather than rely on the machine standards that are built in the machines file, you can actually import actuals to your estimate routing tab to create a more accurate estimate and a more accurate schedule board system. So what I want to do first is I just want to click the add, the plus sign, which is to add a new estimate. And you can see there's various options. If you were going to buy a box completely on the outside and resell it and not manufacture it, you'd click the farm tab, farm out. This is little grayed out, this option here. I don't have the RDO's CAD installed on my laptop, but if I did, this button would be available, and you can load CAD images, the dimensions as well as the images, into our system via this CAD button. This is a separately sold module, but it is available. These buttons can all be added just by starting with new estimate, but there are different estimate types. We have a single item estimate, which is one item, can be multiple up on a sheet or a die, or we can have multiple items either running back to back, we call that a tandem estimate, or if you put multiple items on one die, we call that a combo or a combination or gang run. And that's what these other buttons are for. I'm going to click Add New Estimate, and the first field is the customer field, and I can always press the F1 key and on almost every field, and this gives me a lookup. And now what you're going to be confronted with are a couple of what we call radio buttons. So I can either sort by the customer code or customer number or the name. So I click on name. I do not have to click down here. I can just start typing, and you notice it immediately goes to IBM because it preloads here. Now if I were to click down here and type, then I'd have to press the enter key to find it and then click OK, and that imports it. And I can do the same thing on a lot of fields. I'm going to make up a customer part number, and then I'm going to just start with a new description. Now the description field, this description field appears on the quotation, on orders, inventory reports. It's available for lookups, invoices, pretty much everything. So be consistent with this. You might want to actually say something like reverse tuck, you know, can reverse tuck, and you might want to put a size in there. You know, so the item number you can leave blank. That'll get created. You can type it in and it'll create the finished goods item record, but typically that's left blank because when you add an order, that will automatically get filled in. The estimate quantity, we put in an estimate quantity, and if we press F1, we can put multiple quantities in. Okay, and the releases are how many deliveries, and the more you have, the more it's going to change your freight cost. Again, you can press F1 to find a style, or you can just type it in. Likewise, you can sort. Now the estimate number you can sort a variety of different ways, or you can just type it in. And we have different board. As you noticed, we can find real material, which is something we stocked rolls or stock sheets, or we can put in what we call an estimated material, which doesn't have a sheet size. You notice there's no size, no length, width, or roll size. That's because the system's going to calculate the sheet and roll size that we're going to go buy for the job. The categories are user defined in the finished goods file maintenance system, and you can create any kind of category you want. I'm just going to call this folding cartons, but that leads to sales reporting, and you can get commissions and sales reporting and various inventory reports by category. This is where you actually put in the dimensions that we are going to define for the estimate, and you notice it's in decimals. And then we can say how many colors and how many coatings. There's additional fields if this was not a single item estimate, but this is a single item estimate, and since I'm manufacturing, it defaults to manufactured. Now, just by doing those 7 or 8 fields, it actually builds all these screens. And I could actually go right to the print tab now say calculate, I could pick a specific vendor, or I could have what we call a blank vendor, which could be a blend of all the vendors' costs, or I could say pick the best price. Now when I calculate this, my quantities that I originally entered on that first screen are available, but I could clear them and I could type in something else, or I could say update estimate quantities, and it takes me right back to that original lookup where I was entering quantities, and I could put additional quantities in, and then when I'm done, you notice it fills it in as our default. Now these two buttons down here, or three buttons down here, what this is saying is I want my machine standards to be pulled from my machine file. Same thing with recalculating my make ready hours. If I uncheck those two boxes, it would pull the setup times and the run speeds from my routing tab, which is right here, which we have not explained, but I'll go to that after I'm done here. But I'm going to have the system recalculate. And typically when you have different run speeds for quantity, if any machine standard changes from one quantity to the next, typically you want to have these checked. Also, when you override these or change these, if you want to save those, there's an NK1 parameter which allows you to save these toggle boxes. And this one here just allows me to change my general site administrative markups. So that gives you this pop-up, which allows the estimator to say, well, I want to change my markup on board, material, labor, or even warehousing. Okay? And it'll do that for each quantity. But it imports what's in your file. So I've calculated that estimate, and it basically, I can view any one of these estimates just by clicking the view, or I can click the hard copy to print it out. If I click view, it's going to give me the details of that one item, including the blank size, the die size, the sheet size. Over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see it gives you the length, width, and the total square inches, but it also gives you the square footage. At right here, the total MSF is 1,000 square feet, and total tonnage. And that includes waste. So this first board line here is for your net sheets, which in this case would be 75,000 boxes divided by 9. That's your net sheets, and it would cost, based on $1,300 a ton, $1,828. Then we have 775 sheets set up in waste, and then running. And we've got all your material costs for ink, glue, pallets. We've got all your machine routing, which automatically is calculated based on various setup criteria. And then at the bottom, we break out those three quantities on a per 1,000 basis. Now, all this we have different reports, different formats that you can choose, but this is one of the standard formats. Since I'm here, if I wanted to change the selling price on any one of these, I would click the what if button, and I could change the gross profit, which is changing my out-of-pocket cost. So 156, if I said I wanted to increase that by 50%, it takes that 156 and basically doubles it to 312. Now if I want to mark up my net profit, let's say I wanted to make 10% on a smaller quantity, it's going to mark up full costs, okay? And I could also mark it up by a price per MSF, which is an NK1 parameter setting. And I can do that for each one of these. Now this little Q button in the middle, when that said, do you want to create a quote? Yes. So if I click the quote, it'll actually create my quote. But I'm going to hold off on that. Yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. But we can then print that quote, but we can also modify it later. If we knew those, if I want to go out to this quote button, it'll be out here now. And there's my candy box. And then I could obviously print this if I wanted to print this with this printer icon. And you notice I could email it, I could print the screen printer, and if I email it, what you're going to notice is it always shows me a picture of the quote first with the quantities, and I have a plate charge that automatically appeared. When I exit out, it's going to create my quote into a PDF format, but notice it automatically put multiple contacts on the send to. And the reason it did that is because that was set up in my customer file. We can have unlimited contacts in the customer file. See this icon here, this @ sign? That's in your customer file where you can set up contacts. You can then link those contacts to specific business forms or to specific reports. So think of it as a corporate address book. Everybody can put all their contacts in the corporate customer file, and then it's available for everybody. Okay? I'm going to go back to this estimate, and I'm going to go through the details of the estimate now. So this estimate that I created, 1550, if I go to the specs tabs, you'll notice it said my blank length, width, and depth, and it automatically calculated my blank width. And then it automatically calculated my blank length. But if I want to change, I can change. So if I wanted to override the blank width or override the blank length, I can do that, and it would recalculate my blank square inches. Okay? Now you notice 9.5 times 10 is probably 95 or close to 100, but my blank square inches is only 71. That's because if you look at the box design tab, this is a reverse tuck, and there's a lot of air. So our system's smart enough, we have a formula that kind of eliminates the waste to give you a better square inch formula. And that's important because we calculate the weight of board, the amount of ink that's used based on the square inches. So the style file, which we'll get into in a little while, I'll show you the formula for square inches versus blank width and length. But some of the other options here, obviously you have 2 description lines. But we could also put in a die number, CAD number, plate image. We can also look up CAD images and die images via the binoculars. So if I go out here to this binoculars, I can pull in whatever die image happens to be out there. And then that will be transferred to the box design under the die image or CAD image buttons on the box design. So even if you don't have the CAD file integration module, you can still pick images and add them to the estimate via there. Now another option, if I wanted to create my dies on the line, let's just say this is cutting die number 1550, we've got an NK1 parameter that'll automatically add that to your prep and die file on the fly. And you'll notice you can, it'll automatically bring in the customer code. We can say who owns it, and we can change that. Maybe your own company is going to own the die. They're not going to own it if you're not going to bill it. If your company, which is Advanced Packaging Corp, is going to own it, then obviously, and you can put your default cost in here, whatever that cost may be, and you can just name it. We're just going to say cutting die. And you're going to say include it and integrate into the cost per thousand. So you could integrate, you could mark it up, it could be separately billed, but since it's integrated, we're going to own it. But what you'll notice is it downloads a lot of information from the estimate, but this number of impressions and the data, date received, last estimate, last job, that's automatically going to be updated from the data collection module. So we have a perpetual die file and plate file that you can build on the fly during estimating. The next thing I'm going to go to is the layout tab, and our system automatically will calculate the number up. You'll notice the machine imported from a default parameter, and this is the printing press. But let's just say, as an example, I wanted to lay this out on the Bops die cutter. You'll notice it's a 65 by 145. Unrealistic size, but anyhow, and it comes up with 9 by 10. Now I can modify that, and I say I just want a 4-up die, and modify 2 by 2, and you notice that lineal inches are automatically calculated. This is another formula that is built in a style file, and what it does is it calculates my rule die size, adds trim automatically for that machine. Now if I wanted to cut this on a roll, a sheeter, I would click roll, or if it was a roll-fed machine. If this was a roll-fed machine, it would automatically check that roll. Okay? Now, if I wanted to, and let's go back here, I'm just going to say I'm going to run this on the 408 machine and it's 9 up. If I wanted to pull this out of a stock sheet or a stock roll, I could just say sheet cap down here, and then I could say, well, I want it to be SBS and I want it to look at the 408 machine. And I could sort by either item or name or item code, and it gives me a list. Since I sorted by SBS, it gives me all my stock rolls and stock sheets that I could pull onto this estimate. And it's going to start with the one with the least amount of waste, but this shows me all the items, whether they're on hand or not. If I only want what's on hand, I can click this, and if they have this items might be committed to a job, I can say just show me the ones that are not committed, and then if I pick that, it pulls that stock sheet, in this case, in automatically to the estimate, and the cost will be based on that. But for our estimates here, I'm going to just use a standard SBS 18-inch sheet and let the system calculate the sheet size. If I was doing any window film, that would be right here. I could actually pick the film type, and then I could plug in whether it's blank fed. This is sheet and blank. If I leave this as 0, then it's going to be sheet fed. If I leave this as blank, then it's going to be blank fed. And I'll say the window is 1 by 1. And that's going to then automatically import a window machine and window costs. The next tab, I'm going to go to the inks tab, and it's kind of a split screen. You've got the inks on the left, and you got the packing and freight on the right. That's why we call it ink/pack. Now, if I click the update button at the bottom, you notice it says 5 colors, 1 color. That came from that original estimate tab. And I could type in something like 4C process plus 1 PMS, and let's say plus aqueous coating. This is what's going to go to your quote form. This right here goes to your quote form. Now, when I come here, I can actually pick the actual inks. And you'll notice, because I was on the ink code, it only went to inks. The best way to do your lookups is to delete and F1. And now you've got everything. And if I want to start with just process, I know my process starts with P dash, and I can highlight them all at once and import them all at once. I can change the coverage percentage. I can even say what fountain each one of those inks are going to go into. And then, if I wanted to start with just PMS, I need to spell it right. Now it just starts with PMS. So if I wanted PMS red as an example, actually this would be chocolate candy box. Let's go ahead and look for a PMS. And I'm going to go look at the name down here. I don't know if I have brown, but PMS space brown. I don't. So I'm just going to go back to red. So let's go back and pick that PMS red. And again, keep your naming convention so that when your lookups put everything in the right sequence. And then I've got aqueous coating. And so when you get an order, you might have to come back and fill this in, but for estimating purposes, you may not. Then on the unit count, let's say I have a certain case that I want to use. I can pick a specific case, and I can actually put in the exact, let's say it's only 300 boxes per case, and I'm putting 40 cases on a pallet, and it gives me a total of 12,000 per pallet. Okay? And I can also override the truck and the delivery zone, but this information comes directly from your customer ship to file. Okay, so if this is built in your ship to file, it imports automatically. Now the prep routing screen, like I said, gets automatically built, and I have got a default plate charge that automatically imports. And if I wanted to add that cutting die, I could add that cutting die that I created to this as a billable charge or include it. And then our routing also automatically gets updated. Now if I want to make any changes, to this, maybe the plates are actually 175 each, and I want to mark it up 15%, and then, or I could just type in a selling price. So this is again another split screen. So the buttons here dictate this screen, and then the middle I'm going to explain in a second. These buttons handle this. So I could have different routing for different quantities. So first of all, I'm going to click the build button because I made some changes here, and let the system rebuild. Actually, let me do this also. I'm going to put in a roll. So I need a 23-inch roll. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to rebuild again, but with a build button. And now it didn't bring in the right slitting machine, so I'm going to click my import button and I'm going to put in my sheeter. Okay? And you'll notice I click the import button, and then what it says is, do you want to import the standards? Yes, no. If I say no, then it's just going to override the standards for that machine. But if I say yes, it's going to recalculate the standards, meaning when I say standards, the setup times and the run speeds for all the quantities. Because the machine that I bring in may change the dynamics of the whole estimate. Now, if I wanted a different routing for a different quantity, I could actually copy this and say 75,000 or more. I could actually have a different routing. Okay, so maybe as an example, on a small quantity, if I was down here, you notice, let's say I might need a hand stripping operation. So I can either add or add standards. Add imports my standards from my machine file. If I click the add standards, I have to type in all the setup times and run speeds. So I'm going to click add, and I think I called it AHS. I did not call it HS. Hand, let me see what I call it. I know the department is HS. Okay, I called it stripping. So as an example, for my 25, anything up to 75,000, I'm going to use this routing, which includes hand stripping. But for my 75,000, it's going to use this routing, which has auto stripping and changes my cost. So, and the other thing you'll notice are some other plate changes, and that's used for our tandem logic, which I'm going to explain as soon as I'm done explaining each one of these tabs. Now, this miscellaneous subtotal is if you were buying anything on the outside. If you were getting any kind of outside labor done or outside material, you can just plug in that description, plug in a setup charge for material, plug in a setup charge for labor, or you can put a per thousand charge in for the material. So each estimate quantity is on this screen, and we could plug in a different price. But since this isn't material, I said outside labor, I'm going to actually put it under the labor section, and I'd say, okay, for 25,000, he was charging me $20 per thousand. For 50, 18, and for anything greater than that, 16. But I'm going to include that. Also, I want to point out that whenever you're on a field, there's always a help message at the bottom of the screen. But I could also press the F3 key on any field, and I get online help. So this explains what the Simon code is. So F3 is field sensitive help. The question mark up above is help for the whole screen, but the F3 is field sensitive help. And then I'm going to say I'm going to mark this up by 10%. Now this screen down here are for any miscellaneous materials that you may have added in the raw materials file. As you can see, I've got foam pads or bags or whatever it may be. You can add that and then say I need one of these per finished good item, or I need one of these for every whatever point decimal of a finished good. In other words, you're putting 100 of those cartons in a poly bag. So that's just directly pulling from your raw materials file, whereas this is just manually typed in. Okay, and again, you've got your box design, which shows your 2D image, shows a 3D image, and then you can also add a graphic image, which is any kind of a graph. Now, this is a single item estimate. If I want to add another item to this, I just come down to my add button, and I'm going to say add another form. So I'm just going to add another form, and I'm just going to call this 1550B, and I'm going to call this a vanilla, And I'm going to do basically the same exact box, but I could make a different quantity for that matter. And I'm going to make this folding carton. And I'm going to make it the same size. In other words, it's a true tandem. And I'm just basically going to make everything the same. Okay? And for that matter, I'm going to add another one. And so I'm going to say add another form. I think I said form to the first one. Hold on, let me go look. The go-to button, oh, I did a combo by accident. Okay? I actually added a blank. So the go-to button is how you rearrange. So I'm actually going to change that and make that another form. So now it's actually a back-to-back run. Okay? And I would want to rebuild the routing, obviously. So I'm going to add another form. So I say add another form to this estimate, and then I'm going to say IBM-1550C and make this strawberry. I'm just going to make it the same exact size. And I'll just make this for 50,000 as well. And I'm going to do everything exactly the same. Okay. And now basically what I've done here is I actually have a separate layout tab for each item. Okay? So you can see this form will actually repeat. And the spec tab here, this is for the chocolate, this is for the strawberry, okay, and this is for the vanilla. Okay. So if I wanted to make this a combo job, I can do that very easily as well. So I'm going to go to the inks tab, but see I'm on blank number 3, and there's blank number 2, and then of course blank number 1, which has all of our inks. So the arrow buttons will scroll through each item. So again, you can make a single item, and I'm actually going to go change that to be consistent. I'm going to call that part number A. Okay. And if I want to make, let's say I want these two to run together. But before I do that, I'm going to rebuild my routing. Okay. So I'm going to say build. And what you'll notice on the routing tab is the sheet 1 is for my first item. And then I hear sheet 2. And then you see sheet 3. Okay. Now, what I also want to point out is there's a job standards button here. Anytime you make changes and you've already got a job created, whether you're just adding inks or changing the layout or doing anything, you'll notice this job standards button is always there. And you want to click that to go update your job. But what I want to do is also explain for a tandem, and I can also see the yellow button, I can sort by machine. So you can see my printing press here is now form 1, 2, and 3. If I want to change my standards for this back-to-back run, I would say import. Oops, I went too fast. And I would say, sorry about that, my bad. Do that again. So I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to say import, and I'm going to tab. And it says how many plates are changed. I'm going to say I'm changing 1 plate. How many fountains are changing? 1. And what you're going to notice is my setup hours, which are 0 right now, will change. Okay? So I'm going to sort again. And now it's 0.75 hours on setup. That's because in my machine file, I have the time it takes to change a plate and the time it takes to change a fountain. So I would do the same thing with the next form, okay, and make those changes. But let's say we actually wanted to run this second sheet as a combo. If I wanted to make that as a combo, I can just click my Go To button, come down here, say Update, and I'd say that's Form 2. And now you notice it's 2 blanks on one form. Of course, I'd want to make the layout. We do not automatically do the layout. So let's just say I wanted 1 and 1. It was a 2-up die, let's say. So we'd actually do enter the layout right here on this screen. Now when I'm done, I would rebuild my routing again. Now you'll notice on the routing, there is no Form 3. There's only 2 forms. So basically what I've explained is the difference between a single item, a tandem, and a combo. And I can also, the Go To button always allows me to rearrange it again, and I can put this back to a tandem or back-to-back run. And whatever obviously in this scenario, I probably would want it all to be 3 by 3 because it's the same die. Okay. But we are not a CAD/CAM system, so it doesn't do all the calculations. Single items we do, but not for combinations. So once I've done all my gyrations of changing everything around, I would obviously, in this case, I'd recalculate. Now when I recalculate, I would say purge, or I could say append. Append is going to keep the original, and I'll say append, and I'll say best price for each quantity. And I'm just going to go ahead and accept the defaults again. And now it came up with a grand total this time, because now it's a tandem. So now I'd have to go down to the Items tab to see my individual items. So the first one I did back-to-back, and then the second one was done kind of as a combo. But I could rearrange the cost here as well. So that's kind of the basics of an estimate. I just want to show some of the files that build estimating. But that's the basics of an estimate. Oh, I did forget some of these guys up here. On any one of these items, the paperclip allows you simply to add an attachment. So if I add, I can go look up any kind of an attachment that I want. And if I go pick up, let's just say I'm going to add this image. And then if I run this image, so any kind of a graphic or whatever, I can just add to an estimate. Likewise, this pencil allows me to add notes. I didn't add notes for this estimate, brand new estimate, but you notice I've got press notes and ship notes. That's because if you define standard notes in the customer file by department, every new estimate will have it. So in this case, it says customer press approval of it required. And here I created a department called ship notes, put it in the customer file so that every factory ticket prints these standard notes. If I wanted an extra note, I could just click add. I could F1, find a certain department, or if I know the department, I could just type it in, and I could say, must re-knife okay, in case you repeated this all again and again. Department notes will print out on every job ticket. So that's the pencil. Now I don't have items created here, but if I did, I could then, this book icon is for item specific notes, whereas the paperclip and the pencil are for the estimate or job notes. Okay. Like I said, the question mark is for help. This guy is just a little pop-up to go into another menu. This can be defined by user ID. So if you're in the middle of estimating and, for instance, you wanted to go to, order inquiry, you can just click there and you're right in order inquiry, come back, and you're right back in the estimating. So this is just a quick access menu to go to another part of our software. And this guy really just does the same thing as the yellow buttons, just little circles. So you notice if you click the yellow column, it goes ascending or descending on any column. And then this is just a little decimal equivalent chart because you do enter decimals in our folding carton system. And so here's all the decimals and the equivalents, okay? And like I said, the print tab, you can generate a quote automatically from here. If you've generated an estimate and you wanted to, if you've got a quote out there and you just want to import the pricing from that old quote, you could click the import price button and it'll bring in the price from the quote for each item, okay? So that's an overview of estimating, and of course the exit door or the X up here, or you can say file exit to get out. And of course you can have a quote, you can go to the quote file, you can print quotes. One thing I want to mention on the quote printing, if you did multiple quotes and you wanted them to print on one single quote form, you could say from quote to quote, and it would combine all those quote forms on the same form. And you have quote notes as well. So if you want, we can have default quote notes by customer, but you can change this for any particular quote. If we have an estimate we like, we can copy the whole estimate just by using this option. That'll copy everything. But it does give you the option of saying, I don't want to copy the routing, the die number, and so forth. And what do you want to copy? These toggle boxes can turn on or off as to what you want to copy. And then you can actually even change the customer code and change the description. And in seconds, you have a brand new estimate. The search really is kind of duplication of our browser. So you can search on any one of these fields. Like I said, if I just wanted to look at all the estimates for Hershey Foods, and I would just type in Hershey and a search and click the go button, and there's all my Hershey's. This light blue here is basically, it's an NK1 parameter that says show all my inactive items in a different color. So that's an NK1 parameter. But let's say I only wanted reverse tucks, or let's say tuck top auto bottoms. Probably don't have a lot of them. So it limits. But if I wanted all the reverse tucks, I could say reverse tucks, but I only wanted them, it's got exactly 3 inches, which this is length, this is width, this is depth. I can also search by die number, CAD number, plate number, okay? The other thing I can do is, see that word tuck? It's in the item name. I can do a global search. I can put an asterisk and say tuck. I don't think it's case sensitive. It's not. And it finds that text string, and it'll find it. So normally, if I just said, or if I said tuck here without the asterisk, it wouldn't find it. See? But like if I said reverse, it finds everything that starts with an R. But you put an asterisk in it, and it finds that text string. So a lot of different ways of searching and finding, because over time you may have 50,000 plus estimates, and you need a quick way to find. So we do have a global price change for board. This global price change is for quotes. So this quote file here is, you can automatically globally change the price of quotes a variety of ways. Of course we have unlimited reports, not unlimited, but we've got several reports, and each one can be printed a lot of different ways. So there's a lot of print ranges. This is a report writer option, which is an NK1 parameter. If you don't see these columns on your system, that's because you don't have the reports option, which is NK1 reports. And then under browse forms, these are the hotkeys, and the logical value has to be set to yes to invoke the report writer option. Okay. With that, you can say default, and it'll default this will have all the fields, and you can get rid of whatever fields you want. You can rearrange the sequence, and all of our reports work that way if you invoke the report writer. Just want to briefly go over some of the files that must be built to create an estimate. Of course, all your machines must be built. So if I go to something like a Domino, I can sort by department or by machine. So I know that's the gluing department. So here's all my gluers, and if I go to this domino machine, obviously all your standard, labor rates, speeds. Here's your machine limitations, the blank limitations in this case, because it is a blank fed machine. So you can see feed type, and it's blank fed. But what I want to point out is the standards can be by style. So you can have different, this standards tab dictates the next 3 tabs. So if I don't have a style defined, I can define my standards, again, on an F1 by almost every criteria in all the fields in our estimating system. You can pick 2. In this case, I'm picking blank width and length. So if I go to my setup speed, you see blank width. If I click update, blank length is my rows and, columns, and blank width are my rows across. And then you put up, depending on the size of the blank, what my make ready time is. Similar operations for the run, where I'm putting blank width, blank length, and then a run speed. But I can vary this run speed based on quantity. So I can say over 500 blanks, it runs 10% faster. Over 1,000 blanks, it goes full speed at 10% faster. And likewise, I can slow it down based on caliper. I can also slow it down based on specific board codes in the raw materials file. And I can do certain depths, so I can slow it down. And then I also have spoilage. But you don't have to define it. But as an example, if I go to that 408 machine that I was looking at, this 408 spoilage here, you can see as the number of colors increases, my spoilage percentage increases. But as my quantity increases, my spoilage goes down, which reflects real life. And like I said, that can be by style. Just want to briefly touch on the style file, and I'm going to go to that reverse tuck. Obviously, you're going to have a box design. There's a box design file, which is right here, which has all your images, and you can change them, add them as you wish. We're just pointing, say, this reverse tuck, this is the design it's going to display. Here's the 3D image. But all your formulas are in the style file here. So you can have default dimensions for a glue lap, for a tuck, double knife, panel sizes. You can have default machines. But normally our system is going to automatically route a lot of different things. Gluers, no, you should put your default gluer in here. But printing presses, die cutters, sheeter, things like that do happen. They do automatically route. You can put default materials in here. If it was a 2-piece box, you could put the quantity per set as 2. And then here's your formulas. So when we calculate the width of a blank in this scenario, it's the tuck, the width, the depth, the width, and the tuck. And then going across, it's your glue lap, your width, your length, your width, your length, and your width. And that's what this formula is saying. So here's your glue lap, your length, width, length, width. But then from a nesting standpoint, the second item on the width, and it's telling you on the second item down here on the width to use formula number 2. So that's it right there. So what it's going to do, it's going to basically make a box that's only a tuck, a width, and a depth, because that's going to nest down into here. So our sheet size would be the full blank, first blank, plus the formula for the second blank. So the width of 2 up would be this plus this. And then, of course, we have a square inch formula, which is basically, again, not giving me the full blank formula. And it's just basically saying, just take this times this and exclude these panels, because if you take this width panel and this tuck panel and you moved it down into this section and you move these flaps down into this section, you'd have pretty much a square box. So we have a different formula for that. Okay? With that said, I mean, I could go on to a lot of different files, but this is just the basics of estimating, and I'm not going to go into that. I just want to point out that the control file, right here does have a lot of markups that are used in estimating. In particular, how are you going to calculate a default selling price? It can be either by net or gross profit, and then you put a default in there. Other than this, other than that, you can put that default in the customer file. So I just want to briefly go on the customer file, and then I'm going to end this session. But for this customer, for any customer for that matter, you can have a lot of different box criteria in the customer file, like what is their warehousing days, what is their default markup, what's their default underrun percentage. And like I said, if you have notes in the customer file, those notes will transfer. You can see the pencil here has an asterisk on it. So I've got a lot of different notes. I've got what we call group notes, but we also have department notes. If I click on department, you can see I can have default notes. So this note would transfer to every estimate because it's in the customer file. And the last thing I want to point out is this asterisk button allows you to have unlimited contact. Each contact can have unlimited notes. So you can write a book on their notes, on the contact notes. But also you can indicate an email address, and then if you say email notification, you say, okay, whenever I email any one of these reports or forms, in this case, if I email a shortage report, Joe will automatically be on the send to of that email. Likewise, order changes. And actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back. I think I did this estimate for IBM, but I can't remember. I think it was. And if I go back to this, I'm going to go back to the contacts. And you'll notice if I go down, I should be on that quote form, and that's why I came up as on a quote. But anyhow, this is how you link specific people or contacts to specific business forms or to specific reports. So with that, I'm going to basically turn the forum over to Tony for questions. I hope it was informative, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Joe. Very good. So yeah, to enter your question, just enter it in the chat box down in the bottom right corner of your GoToMeeting box. Send it to the organizers so that I can read the questions, have Joe answer those for you. So no question is a dumb question. We're looking for all questions. Enter those in the chat box, and we'll get those entered and answered. Joe, I do have one question that has come up that maybe you can talk about while we're waiting for some other questions. When importing from a CAD file, will the software be able to work in tandem with the boxed CAD, or do we have that in the works?
I'm not sure what boxed CAD is. Right now, the integration we wrote is with Ardios CAD software.
Right. Okay. So Boxed is one of the die cut makers, die cutter mixed by die cutter. They must have their own CAD. We'll look at that, and
so we would have
that would be valuable.
We'd have to write that interface. I do not know of an interface for Boxed.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and enter any other questions down in the chat box. I'm looking for some questions for Joe. Here's one. In the machine file, for example, do you have a layout that describes each field and what it means? For instance, B equal blank and an explanation when to consider as a blank?
Not sure I understand that question.
You want me to read it again? In the machine file, for example, do you have a layout that describes each field and what it means? For instance, B equal blank. Like we use a lot of letters in our system to mean different things. We have a guide or something that tells what those codes are.
Well, we have documentation. The question mark gives you an overview of this screen, okay? And then when you're on any field, you get, like if I'm on a department field, I can press F3 and I get field sensitive help. Okay, so if I'm on this field, I'm not sure if I get help on this as a drop down, but let's try that. Okay, perfect. I do get help on that as well. So feed meaning B, that was one of the letters that was, you can see, so R means roll fed, S means sheet fed, B means blank fed. Okay, so if you're on this field, what does it mean? Well, at the bottom of the screen, it also explains it. So R means roll, S means sheet fed, B means blank fed parts. But if you're on that field and you press F3, it gives you help, and it explains what each one of those are. Okay.
Perfect. Yep, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for an answer. Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead and enter those down in the chat box. So here's one along the same lines, but when you would choose B as opposed to F.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you answered that. I'm not sure.
Well, B is blank fed. The best way to say it, if an item can run 2 up on a sheet, that's sheet fed. For instance, if I just go back to this estimate that I did, these are sheet fed machines. Now this window machine could be sheet fed or blank fed, but the gluers are always blank fed. You feed one blank at a time in that gluer. But you're feeding, in this case, this layout was 3 by 3, 9 up. If we say our speed is 1,000 per hour, it's important to know if I was running 9,000, if I needed 9,000 blanks, I would be feeding 9,000 blanks through the gluer, but I'd only be feeding 1,000 sheets through the die cutter and the press, excluding any waste. So 9,000 divided by 1,000 is 9 hours. So we don't want, we don't want 9,000 through the die cutter. It's 1,000 through the die cutter. So that blank or sheet fed is critical. So if I go to a printing press, it's obviously sheet fed because we're feeding sheets, not blanks. If you do a blank, maybe another way of looking at it is in the estimating system, your length, these are inside dimensions, inside length, width, depth, which gives you a blank width and a blank length. This is a blank, 1 up. The sheet is multiple up. In this case, I'd have 3 going across the sheet and 3 going through the machine. That is a sheet. Okay?
Yep. Okay. So back on the question about the box CAD system, it's actually a system called Impact, made by Advantzware. I think you may be familiar with that, Joe. I think we do actually have some other customers that have requested that we may be working with. So that, I guess, I would say is on the radar screen. I'm not sure what the time frame on that is, but I think that is something we'll be doing.
Yeah, I'm not aware. At this point, we have not integrated with Impact.
Right. But it is a nice piece of software. I believe it has a die library and some other things in it. So
right. It's something we'd have to get the specifications from Arden and then work with a customer, but it's something we can definitely do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I need some other questions. Anybody else have a question that they'd like us to answer? If you could, please enter that down in the chat box at the bottom of your GoToMeeting screen. Now we're here to answer questions. Any basic question, advanced question, we'd like to get those answered for you. So we'll give it a minute or two here, Joe, see if we have any other additional questions.
Okay.
Here come one. How do you come up with ink coverage for estimating ink usage?
Okay. Well, first thing, for each ink in the raw materials file, all of your materials are in the raw materials file, including board. So if I go to material type down here, I can press I for ink, and I can see all my inks. But I'm actually going to go to that P dash. So I got processed blanks, black, cyan, magenta. Each one of these has a yield factor. So this is saying for this ink will spread out 300,000 square inches per pound. So that's square inches per pound. So that's our yield factor. We can also have a minimum amount of pounds. And then, of course, we have the cost here. So it's $5 per pound. But the way we calculate ink is in the estimating tab here, we're giving it the coverage, okay? So we're saying this black ink, in this example, is 20% coverage. Well, 20% coverage of what? Of the square inches. That's why it's important to have the right square inch formula. So 20% of 71, but it's multiplied by the total number of blanks we're estimating. So that the coverage, the square inches of a blank times the square inches of the blank times the coverage of the ink is how many total square inches you need, times obviously the quantity of blanks, the estimate quantity, divided by the yield factor in the raw materials file. And I'm not sure, but probably this, not sure where the question mark went here, but there should be help on the online help should explain that, okay?
Does that does the online help also cover yield? How you come up with the yield?
The yield is, you get the yield by the ink vendor. They give you that.
Okay.
They tell you, different. If you're painting a wall in your house, as an example, different inks are going to cover different amount of coverage depending on how thick the ink is. But the ink vendor should be able to give them that.
Okay. Is the 300,000 figure a good average for ink coverage in the raw materials file?
I can't answer that really. I don't have that knowledge.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Looking for some other questions down in the chat box. Anyone has a question, we want to get those answered for you. Any other questions? If there's any question, just type it in. We'll get it answered for you. We appreciate all these questions, by the way. It's really helpful for this to be interactive. If you have a question, that means somebody else probably has the same question. And sometimes we go fast and may have covered something too quickly for you. So here's the question. Stretch wrap pallets. Is there a way to put in a cost for a stretch wrap pallet?
Yeah, we don't really have a dedicated logic for stretch wrap. The only thing you could do is somehow put it into, well, actually, you could probably do it here. We have what we call layer pads and dividers. It'd be a little bit of a workaround, but you could actually say this is per pallet. If you could come up with what the cost, what you figure how many lineal footage of stretch wrap you put on a pallet, you could actually say, instead of saying layer pad or divider, you could say, create a code called stretch wraps. If I can, oops, my bad. But you could create a code. I exited out of there by accident. But you could create a code called stretch wrap, and then you could enter it there and say that's my, I need one of those per pallet. Other than that, the only other way to do it is to come up with a miscellaneous charge here. So, and you could say you need one. So you could say stretch wrap here, and just say I need one per pallet, and actually that wouldn't work. That's one per finished good item. So I think this would probably be the better way to do it. And when I say those two, some of our clients may not have these codes, but under network, some of our old clients, we added these two codes, case layer and case divider. If you're not using them, you could certainly come here and change the description code to shrink wrap as an example. Okay? And then you have to create a raw materials for that. But I'm just going to go look up one of those material types. So like as an example, I got layer pad. You can change that to shrink wrap. And then you just have to put a cost in, Say it's $1 per pallet or $2 per pallet. That's one way to capture the cost, so it's part of the estimate. But that'd be a little bit of a workaround, but that should work.
Okay, great. Here's a question for you. Where does the customer part number appear versus the item description on the order, load tags, bill of lading, quotes, etc.?
Well, the answer to that is it depends on the form that we've written for the customer. But if this estimate 1550, if I go out and, you know, any order for that matter, the customer part number does not have to match the item number. So let's just see here. So yeah, so this customer part number on this order is ABB 1548, but the item number is here. But where it appears on the business form strictly depends on the business form. You know, every business form can be different. But I guess the answer is we can have it print wherever you want it to print.
Okay. You have any examples that you could show, Joe?
You said on a quote form or a bill of lading
on an order, load tag, or bill of lading.
Okay, well, I don't know what an order form is, but if you print an acknowledgement,
okay.
Let's just see where that prints. So this is printing this is printing the customer part number. It's the item number is right here, and the part number is right underneath of it on this quote form. If I make a bill of lading for this, let me just see if, okay, this bill of lading already exists, maybe. Yeah. So if I print this bill of lading, this really has nothing to do with estimating, but so this is not printing this has got the part number here and the finished good item number here. But like I said, it all depends on the business form where it prints. We can have it, some people print the part number and the item number right underneath of each other, and then the order number and the PO number. So it really depends on the business form.
And we have multiple options for each one of those, right? So they can choose the one that makes the most sense for them.
But most customers will, you know, tweak an existing form and create their own.
Right. Okay. What other questions do we have? If you have a question, you think of something, just enter it down in the chat box. We'll get it answered for you. I think we might have exhausted all of our questions.
Okay.
So I guess we'll call it an end to the webinar. Thank you for participating today. We appreciate the feedback. We appreciate the questions. And we appreciate you participating in our webinar. So we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next one, which is coming up soon. Thank you.